All right, today we're going to start adding some color into our colored pencil part of this triptych flower abstract drawing project. So as you can see here, I have the contour outlines of the shapes from my colored pencil reference photo. So I'm talking about this one in the middle right here. You can also see that I've erased the kind of grid from my project, and I drew really light because I knew that I would be removing all of the pencil from this paper before I go back in with colored pencil. So some of you may have gotten a start on this color mixing test worksheet, and that's going to help you guys figure out what colors are in this little square and how to mix these colors, because it's very unlikely that the color is going to be an exact match to the colors that you have in your colored pencil boxes. In my classroom, in Mrs. McFadden's classroom, we have 48 sets of colored pencils, of Prismacolored colored pencils, and I do have a handful of the 72 pencil sets that have a little bit more range of colors, and they have some grays in them as well. So if you need a specific color, you might just need to look around for a set that has what you need. But in a lot of instances, you're going to have to actually mix the colors you see here in order to get the correct color. Now, something else I want you to remember, I want you to try to color match this as best you can. But if for some reason it doesn't look how you're expecting, don't panic. This is an abstract drawing. It's not really going to look exactly like a flower when we're all done with this, and that is why we zoomed in so close on these reference photos, so they lose a little bit of that flower quality when we crop out a lot of the details that identify it as a flower. So when you're tackling your colored pencil, you're going to want to pick a spot of your image to start with. Now, I'm pretty confident in my outlines here. I think if anything, maybe just the end of this flower isn't exactly as it should look. But you are eventually going to erase your pencil lines before you go in with the colored pencil. Because if you lay colored pencil down on top of this pencil line, you will not be able to get the pencil line to go away. Especially if I lay like this section right here in my reference photo is this kind of yellowish red color. If I lay my pencil down or my colored pencil down on top of that pencil, I will not be able to erase from underneath the colored pencil, and it will show through. So I'm going to erase. And I'm actually just going to go back in with my light yellow here, and I'm just going to kind of lay out this space again with my colored pencil so I know where I'm drawing. Now, I know I talked about this a lot as you guys were practicing with your colored pencil activity, but you do need to build up your colored pencil with lots of really light layers in order to get it to blend successfully. So I've already practiced this kind of color that goes in this space here. I'm painting this kind of background, I'm coloring this background flower petal back here, and I've practiced that a little bit on this color mixing worksheet. If you need to practice on some scrap paper, just let one of us know and we'll find some scrap paper for you. You can use the back of your worksheet. You can see I've colored a little bit on mine to figure out which colors to use. Color in some scrap paper first, because once you lay it down on your final drawing paper, it's really hard to make that go away. So I'm going to start by just laying a very light base layer of my yellow pencil down, because this yellow is the base of this kind of color that I'm making this dark petal. Now, the whole petal in the background here isn't going to stay this light color. I am going to start blending some darker values in to help this kind of transform into this darker value that you see on my source image. But I'm starting with a nice light layer of yellow. From there, I'm going to go in with a couple more of my colors here. Now I've got this kind of like red color. It's called Crimson Lake. Sounds very spooky. I'm going to go in with that Crimson Lake color, and I'm going to start in my shadows, and I'm going to start blending that color a little bit, and I'm paying close attention to my reference photo because it's not going to stay like this red. I don't think goes up. Maybe it does. I'm going to put a light layer of the red up here at the end of this flower petal, but it's really mostly yellow down here at the end of the photograph. And then there is quite a bit of heavy shadow right here. So I'm just going to build up that red a little bit more bold in this area. All right, and then down here at this end of the drawing, it is the darkest. So I'm gonna go in with this brown color, this brown terracotta color, and I'm gonna add some of that terracotta in down here because that's where it's the darkest. Now I'm going back to my yellow because I do want this to blend. I want this to create this kind of like even, nice even transition. It's blended smoothly. I want to see a nice gradual transition of color. I don't want it to be super abrupt if that's not what your source photo looks like. So I'm just going to go in and add another yellow on top. And I'm building this up in several smooth layers to get this to blend as best that I can. Now, when it comes to blending, remember you can layer several layers on top of each other. You can also use your colorless blender to blend your colors. Okay, but I'm gonna start by blending. I'm gonna get this to look as close as I can get it with just my colored pencils before I go in with my colorless blender. When you're using colorless blender, in fact, when you're using your colored pencils too, remember the paper only accepts so many layers of color. After a certain point, you're not gonna be able to add any more color on top of here because the tooth of your paper or the texture of your paper is going to get pushed all the way down, and then it's not going to accept any more of this nice waxy pencil. So that's why you gotta build up the layers slow and steady to make sure that you're able to transition those values as best you can and as accurately as you can. Okay, so I'm just going in now and I'm looking at the dark spots and I'm going to be adding this dark pencil, this dark red, into some of my shadow areas. Now remember, I want to see a range of values, so I'm doing lots of blending here. And what I might need to do is I might need to look at my reference photo. I just want to double check because I still think this might need to be darker here, and even darker than this Crimson Lake and terracotta color that I have. I almost think I might need to go in with a brown. That's a little bit too cool of a brown. I might need to go in with a dark brown and add even more of a shadow there. I will tell you to be exceptionally careful with your black colored pencil. It is not very often that the shadows or the darkest values of a color are pure black. Okay, that doesn't happen very often. So be very, very cautious and careful with your black colored pencil. There is probably only one place where I'm gonna add black colored pencil. That's gonna be maybe this little shadow right here, and it's gonna be right here in the background. I'll see if I can zoom in a little bit closer. This spot right here, that's gonna be maybe a little bit of black, and then maybe a little bit right here in this shadow. Otherwise, I'm probably not gonna mix black into my colors here. And that is intentional because not very many of these shadows or these darkest values are black. So be very careful and cautious with your black colored pencil. Use it sparingly. If you remember from our colored pencil practice, you can mix a shadow or you can mix a dark value by mixing two complementary colors together too, in order to make a nice dark brown or an almost black. So that's an option too if you guys don't want to use the black. So be very cautious with that black colored pencil. Okay, so I'm just paying attention to where the shadow is. There's a little bit more here. Then I'm going back in again. I think I maybe need a little bit more of this red here. I want to go really light though, okay? I don't want to add too much of it, but it just feels a little bit too yellow still. So I'm just gonna keep building up layers and making it match as best I can to my source photo. I'm coloring in one direction. And then remember, you do have the option to burnish your colored pencil. Burnishing is building up the layers of that colored pencil so it's so thick and waxy that you get a nice shiny look to it. Remember that you can burnish by building up lots of layers. You can you can burnish with white colored pencil, or you can burnish with that colorless blender. So if I grab my colorless blender here, I'm just gonna double check. Oh, that's actually French gray. That's not a colorless blender. It's a good thing I checked. All right, colorless blender. Looks like this. I am going to check the end of my colored pencil to make sure that it doesn't have any other colored wax on it. This happened to have some blue colored pencil on it. And then once I get that nice and cleaned off, I can use that colorless blender to go back in to my colored pencil, and I can burnish these colors down, and that's going to help eliminate some of the white that's showing through my paper, and it's going to help to blend those colors together even more. I think this gives a really luxurious blended together look. It makes this pencil look really soft and rich. And I think it just gives it a nice finished look. If colorless blender is not your jam, you do not have to use it. I'm not personally requiring you to use the colorless blender. It's just a tool that you guys have in your toolbox that you have the ability to use to create, a specific look in your colored pencil drawing. Remember though, if you do use colorless blenders, you're going to want to save that for the last step, because once I put the colorless blender down, it's going to be really difficult for me to go back in and add more color on top of this. I could go back into these spots here and get some of those thin spots, but it's going to be really difficult for me to mix and blend, because when there's several layers of colored pencil built up here, it's just going to kind of sit on top of here and scoot around on top of that waxy layer, and it's not really going to blend in with the layers underneath it. So keep that into consideration. It's up to you if you want to work one color at a time or one section at a time. I will probably work from top to bottom. One thing to keep in mind is this colored pencil will smear a little bit. So if you have really light white areas that you don't want this dark color in, be mindful of where your hands are as you're coloring. Like I said, I probably will work from top to bottom. So I will work in these pink flower petals next. So then I would get my pinks ready, my magentas ready, and then I would start kind of building up my pink next to this. And remember, I'm going to erase this line right here before I start adding value to this spot, because I want that colored pencil to be gone before I put colored pencil on top of it. Remember, our flowers do not have outlines. So yes, I am laying down this light layer of colored pencil to serve as a contour line, but these flowers do not have outlines. Do not take your colored pencil and put a nice big dark outline all around here, because that might not be what this ends up looking like. I can see in my reference photo right here that up next to this light lime green line here, the flower petal is much lighter. So I'm not going to take this dark magenta and I'm not going to outline right there, because that's going to be too dark and it's going to stick out and look weird. So you kind of have to work carefully and slowly to make sure that you are not outlining and you're building up lots of layers of colored pencil.